Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day number 782. Wednesday, May the 5th, May the 15th, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course it is Wednesday. That is the day that I take out the trash and have some chicken. Every Wednesday. Take out the trash and have some chicken. Okay, so we have some very important stories to get to today. I'm pretty sure most of you know the most important story of the day, which actually broke on Tuesday, late Tuesday evening, about 9 o'clock, after I had already done my video for Tuesday. So we'll be getting to that today. But before I do, I just want to make a comment here on Seth Rich, because I haven't talked about Seth Rich in detail in a while. He has come up in the last couple of weeks in the comments section. People bring it up, and because I guess we're talking about going back to the origins of when the Trump-Russia collusion thing started, or the frame-up, or whatever you want to call it. A lot of people talking about we're going back to the origins. Bill Barr wants to go back to the origins of that. And if you go back to the origins of that, and you get back to the DNC hack, you get back to Seth Rich, you get back to the private contractors accessing the NSA database, you go farther back than that, you get back to Alexandra Chalupa and David Kramer over there in Ukraine and all those sorts of things. You go beyond that, you get back into 2014 with Michael Flynn and all these things. But you know, Seth Rich is right in the middle of all that, and he's an important piece of the overall puzzle. And you know, about I guess it was about 2 months after the Seth Rich murder, I did 2 videos. This is long before TowerGate videos started. It would have been back in October of 2016, I guess. And it was called Seth Rich Murder Part 1, Seth Rich Murder Part 2, where I basically went through and analyzed what I thought was going on there. At that time, there was still a lot of unanswered questions. And essentially what I did was I went and took a look at the police report that was made after the Seth Rich murder. And it was on PDF, and I went and looked at that. And I looked at a lot of news reports. I even emailed the 2 detectives who were on the case back at that time. So I put all this information together, and I did the 2 Seth Rich videos. At that time, I concluded that that the narrative that was out there, and is still out there today, which is that Seth Rich was murdered and it was a botched robbery. And the conclusion I came to a long time ago, that it was not a botched robbery. I still contend to this day that it was not a botched robbery, even though that is pretty much the narrative that has been out there forever, and it remains to this day. So I just wanted to go offer just my thoughts on that and why I believe that, because it has been a long time, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, just a couple minutes here to tell you what my thoughts are on that and why. So I do not believe, nor have I ever believed, that the Seth Rich murder was a botched robbery. I don't believe it was a botched robbery. I believe it was a successful robbery. When most people think about a robbery, they think about, well, they say Seth Rich, no one took his wallet, they didn't take his gold chain, they didn't take his ring, they didn't take this, they didn't take that. All these items that would have had monetary value. But my contention is that the people who murdered Seth Rich were looking to rob him, but they weren't looking for money or gold or anything else. What they were looking for was information. Information which he kept on him in the form of a flash drive, jump drive, whatever you want to call it, an electronic storage device. So here's what I think happened. I think Seth Rich was the person on the inside at the DNC. I think he was an angry Bernie Sanders supporter who realized that Bernie was being screwed. I think he stumbled onto that, realized it, and he wanted to get, he wanted to expose that. He wanted to expose what was being done to Bernie. And I believe that he is the one who extracted that data and put it onto several, probably different flash drives. And then I believe he wanted to find a way to get it out there. And I think he believed that WikiLeaks was the best way to do it. I also believe that he was wanting to get paid for it. And so what I think he did was, I think he sent a sample. I think he sent a sample just so that WikiLeaks could see that he was actually had legitimate information that they could look at and verify. And then once they verified that his information was legitimate, then they would work out an arrangement, a financial arrangement, for him to give the rest of the data to them. And I believe that he was carrying these digital storage devices on his person, either on a chain around his neck or in his laptop bag, because we know that they say everywhere he went, he had that laptop with him. And he likely had that laptop with him that night. He had like a backstrap thing with his laptop in it. I think he had those flash drives. I think somebody found out that he was the one who extracted that information. I think they figured that out. I think when they got to him, they didn't know what he had done with the information at that time, if anything, but they wanted to make sure that they got that information back. And so I think that what happened to Seth Rich was that the individuals who came for him that night came to get that information off of him. So I think that he probably had some flash drives, digital storage devices. I think that that is what they wanted, and I think that's what they got. And because when you look at the amount of data that would have been available to the person who got that information, why would they release so little of it? Clearly it wasn't a full release. What we actually got from WikiLeaks was very little compared to what someone could have gotten had they had the access the person who accessed it had. Whoever got to what WikiLeaks released could have had a lot more than that, and probably did. So I think what WikiLeaks had was a sample. They were never able to get the rest of it because Seth Rich was murdered before they could get that worked out. I think it was a successful robbery and that the individuals who robbed him got what they were looking for, which was the remaining information that he had in the form of some sort of a electronic storage device on his person, which is what they were looking for. That's why they didn't bother with money or anything else. They were simply looking, by the people who paid them, probably said, hey, do whatever you have to do, get the data away from him, get it. It's probably on a flash drive or something like that. And I think that that's what they wanted, and I think that's what they got. So I think that whoever pulled off that deal on Seth Rich was successful, not failed. And I think it was a robbery, but a successful one. I think they got what they wanted. The remaining files or documents or information that he had taken from the DNC that was on his person. And once they got that, then they took care of the other part of their business, which was to silence him. And I think that that's basically what happened. I also believe that his brother was involved in not so much the extraction of the information, but was some sort of a middleman or was somehow working with Seth Rich to get that information to WikiLeaks or someone else. So I think that that is basically what happened there with the Seth Rich murder. That's just my opinion based on the evidence we have and everything I can find at this point. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on Seth Rich. And I do hope that at some point we get to the bottom of it. And the one man who could do that is probably Julian Assange. And I certainly hope at some point someone sits down with Assange and works that out. He'll never give up the name of a source, but it's very likely that he would produce documents proving it was not Russia or some state actor. He may not show who it was, but he can show who it wasn't. And once you eliminate the Russians and any state actor, then everyone had to say, okay, well, if it really wasn't Russians and it wasn't a state actor, then where did that stuff come from? And that takes us back to Seth Rich. So, that's my thoughts on Seth Rich. Now, let's move on to really important news here. First of all, I want to make it perfectly clear at this point how I feel about Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele should already be indicted at this point. I believe he will be. He was working for the FBI. He was being paid by the FBI. And as a paid informant for the FBI, he broke his agreement. And in fact, it's actually, what he did was actually criminal. He was being paid by the FBI. And he talked to government personnel like Ms. Kavalik, Jonathan Weiner, and possibly others, obviously communicating with FBI officials, but that's what he was being paid to do. It's the other people he was communicating with, including the media and many other people, third-party contractors, and just about anyone who would listen to his crazy story. Remember, the whole time he's being paid as an informant. Christopher Steele, we do have an extradition treaty with Britain, but we shouldn't have to use it. They should just send someone over there with the papers and arrest him, put him on a plane, and bring him back here. Ultimately, Christopher Steele is going to have to answer for his activities regarding the 2016 election and beyond. And it appears to me that he has broken the law. He absolutely should be arrested and brought back here to stand trial. And he should definitely be answering some questions for a change. So that's just my thoughts on Christopher Steele. Trey Gowdy was on Fox News, and he was talking about the fact that Attorney General Barr has appointed this prosecutor, John Durham. And throughout the course of that conversation, Gowdy basically said, probably the two most important things he said was, he said that, and remember, Trey Gowdy, John Ratcliffe, and Mark Meadows have seen everything that is available for them to see, unredacted. They've seen it all. They would know more about any of this than any of us because they've seen more information than any of us. Trey Gowdy says that there was never any effort really made to verify the dossier. They never even tried to verify it, which is a point I've been making for a very long time. And why is that? Because they knew from the very get-go that it was bullshit. They knew it from the very get-go. And that's why they never made any effort to verify it. He also says that there is a phone call, and he said, I recommend to the prosecutor now, Mr. Durham, that he look into the communications between James Comey and John Brennan in the month of December of 2016, because there he will find conversations between Comey and Brennan, which will tell you everything that you need to know, and especially will prove that they knew that the dossier was bullshit and had no intention of trying to prove it or verify it or anything else. There was no need to. They already knew it was bullshit. And I think that that's what Trey Gowdy is pointing to. I assume that IG Horowitz has maybe looked at that already. Possibly Barr has seen it. And we assume that at some point, Mr. Durham, especially now that Trey Gowdy is giving him that tip, will probably take a look at those communications. So that was a very interesting interview with Trey Gowdy. I imagine most of you have seen the clip of Rodenstein giving that speech the day after he officially left his employment at the DOJ, and he's jumping all over Comey, and with good reason. So in context of various other things he said in that speech, he started talking about Comey, and he said that Comey has now become a partisan pundit. He's out there writing books. And then he said, then he attacked me personally by saying that he's questioning, this is Rodenstein saying, Comey's questioning my strength of character, and also he's worried about the fate of my immortal soul. So here we have Rodenstein going after Comey. And this just kind of plays into something I've kind of noticed over the past 6 months or so, and we're seeing even more and more of it as we move forward, which is that you're clearly seeing the FBI people line up behind FBI and DOJ lining up behind DOJ. So this is becoming a circular firing squad, FBI and DOJ sort of falling in rank. But that leaves out the intelligence community, John Brennan and obviously Clapper. And of course, I think that both Clapper is going to try to play dumb. Brennan is going to pretend he was duped and is probably going to blame the FBI. They're all going to be pointing the finger at each other and trying to blame each other. But they're all guilty as hell. They're all guilty as sin. They all knew exactly what they were doing. They knew the dossier was bullshit. And yes, they were trying to carry out a coup against the president. This is going to be proven by the witnesses' testimony, by the documents, and by their own emails, by their own texts, by their own communications, are going to be ultimately what's going to hang them. So, anyway, Rodenstein out there getting his 2 cents worth. And I don't believe Rodenstein is a white hat. I believe Rodenstein is looking out for Rodenstein, and I believe he's turned, essentially, is what I think about him. Now, getting to the biggest story of yesterday, of course, was that AG Barr had appointed John Durham, who's, we're told, working with the CIA's Gina Haspel, who I consider her a deep state trog and not someone I would trust. Dan Coates, I don't have much confidence in Dan Coates. He's the one that's holding up the release of thousands and thousands of pages of documents that have been requested by the Congress. He is the guy holding that up. And of course, Christopher No Shit Sherlock Ray of the FBI. If we're relying on Mr. Durham to work with these three characters, not much is going to happen. I certainly hope Mr. Durham is everything people say he is, and if he is, he'll figure out right away that Haspel, Ray, and Coates are not going to be cooperating very much. They'll be involved in more cover-up. Hopefully he'll figure that out sooner than later. Now, let's talk a little bit about the background of Mr. Durham. Of course, he is a U.S. attorney from Connecticut. He's looking into the origins of the Spygate fiasco, the coup, whatever you want to call it. He's looking into possible wrongdoing, potential wrongdoing, among the national security officials. National security officials. Durham began his investigation weeks ago. The announcement was made yesterday, but apparently his investigation, he was contacted weeks ago. He's weeks into his investigation. Why would they suddenly come out and announce it now? Well, because Barr, obviously, from what he's learned from Horowitz and from what he's learned from his own investigation, has already seen enough to know that there was criminal wrongdoing. And therefore, you need someone to prosecute it. You need a prosecutor. So he turned to someone he believes will be honest and someone he can control or deal with, have a lot more control over than a special counsel. In other words, William Barr is going to check up with him a couple times a week and make sure he's making progress. William Barr already knows what happened. He just needs someone else to make it happen, if you know what I mean. So he's already been around for several weeks working on this case. Of course, we know that he's known for being the type of prosecutor that does go after corrupt government officials. He sent 2 corrupt FBI officials to jail regarding the Whitey Bulger case, which was, of course, Uncle Bob the Executioner was deeply involved in that, and in that corruption. He escaped being caught up in it. Mueller escaped it, but these other 2 FBI agents did not. And they were essentially, what they did was they framed 4 people. And this, of course, happened in Boston. Of course, Uncle Bob the Executioner, as I just said, was involved in the Whitey Bulger case. He was involved in the Uranium One situation. And, of course, he's been involved in covering up the crimes of the Clinton Foundation. My guess is that Mr. Durham knows all of this. He knows Mueller very well. He knows that Mueller is a dirty cop. And so, if you ask me, I think one of the most nervous people in the country today is Uncle Bob the Executioner. Pretty sure that Mr. Durham is the very last person that Uncle Bob the Executioner wanted to see being brought in to this investigation, because Mr. Durham is very familiar with Mueller, and probably Weissman as well, very familiar with their tactics. Mueller escaped his clutches the last time, but maybe he won't this time. Durham is an expert in complex organized crime, violent crime, public corruption, and financial fraud matters. He was sworn in on February 22nd, 2018. He also was known for investigating the CIA for their destruction of evidence and for the mistreatment of detainees. That investigation went from 2008 to 2012. And of course, they could not say he's a partisan hack because, of course, he worked for both A.G. Holder and Janet Reno. His nickname, or what he's known for being, is a straight shooter, and he's pretty much of a bulldog. And he apparently is someone who does not mind going after corrupt FBI, DOJ, CIA type officials. He apparently is someone who's not easily intimidated, very much like William Barr. In fact, his persona, the way he's described, is very much like William Barr. I'm pretty sure William Barr was very careful before he made that appointment, making sure he gets the right guy. So let's hope that he did well and that Mr. Durham is the right guy, because he has all the powers he needs. He can subpoena anybody. He can look at anything. And he can prosecute. He can convene grand juries. He can indict. Let's hope William Barr made a good decision and that Mr. Durham gets to the bottom of the whole damn thing. Gateway Pundit is showing there was a text message from Peter's been stroking us. This particular text, I guess, was recently unearthed, and it shows that Peter's been stroking us was making fun of the PP-Gate story at the same time that the FBI was applying for the FISA warrant to spy on President Trump. And of course, part of that evidence that was used to spy on Trump was the PP-Gate story, which Peter's been stroking us would have certainly known about. So it's kind of interesting that he's joking, making a joke about the PP-Gate story at the very same time he knows that they're getting the FISA. And he knows that the PP-Gate story was part of getting the FISA. So, something new there. We had John Ratcliffe, who was on Sunday Morning with Maria Bartiromo. I did see it, I just haven't had time to comment on that. But Ratcliffe told Bartiromo that Comey is or should be under investigation for violations of the Espionage Act. Lindsey Graham was also on Maria Bartiromo Sunday Morning. He said that he wants to talk to Kathleen Kvalik. He also said that there is a document that he has seen that shows that the FBI knew that the Steele dossier lacked credibility, and so he's going to try and get it released. Which brings me to something I want to comment on one more time. Not that I haven't done this 1,000 times, but I feel like I have to do it again because it just never ends. I continue to hear the dossier being referred to as the Steele dossier. As I have been saying now for literally close to 2 years, ever since I read the dossier, that Christopher Steele was not the author of the dossier. Okay, as someone who, in the military, I read thousands of intelligence reports. I authored several dozen raw intelligence reports. I know what intelligence reports look like, read like, and sound like. So, when the dossier was published by BuzzFeed on January 10th, and I read it the first time, I read it kind of quickly, then I went back and read it slowly. Then I read it a third time the next day. And then, later that week, I did 2 TowerGate videos. One video where I basically went through just the general nature of the dossier, how it read, and various other specific things about it. The second day, I hit some of the major points and accusations that were made in the dossier. And I laid out at that time that it was total bullshit. And I laid out at that time that I did not believe that Steele was the author of the dossier. Because Christopher Steele was the head of the Russia desk for MI6, intelligence officer for well over a dozen years. He would know what a professional, serious intelligence report looks like. And I've seen many of them. And the dossier looks nothing, sounds nothing, reads nothing like any intelligence report I have ever seen in my life. So I knew very early on, after reading the dossier, that it wasn't written by someone who's a professional intelligence officer who writes those reports. One of the most important things that we were told about an intelligence report is your source, or to what degree what you're reporting is true, or that you can prove is true, how much of it is it 90%? You're 90% sure? You're 10% sure. This is the most important part of any type of intelligence report, because the intelligence is only as good as it is reliable. So intelligence people look at thousands and thousands of bits of intelligence. They have to know what things are worth wasting their time on and what things are worth throwing in the shit can. They don't have time to spend chasing around badly sourced intelligence reports. And the ones that we made out actually had a format. We followed a format. We just didn't take out a piece of paper and start writing on it. It asked questions. It asked about 20 questions, and then on page 2, it asked you to write a summary. And it always wanted to know names, dates, times, locations, and all these sorts of things as far as your confidence level of all the accusations you make. If you look at the Steele dossier, it does not look, read, or sound like any intelligence report I've ever seen or written. You can talk to anybody who was in the military who handled classified information, and they will tell you the same. You know, intelligence reports look a certain way. They sound a certain way. And the Steele dossier, to me, I looked at it from the very beginning and said, this is bullshit. And most importantly, because the sourcing was bullshit. So I think ultimately when we get to the end of this thing, we get to the bottom of this, if they do get to the bottom of this, one of the biggest revelations that we're going to find is that they're going to at some point have to come out and say, wow, we really got it wrong. Christopher Steele really wasn't the author of the dossier. He really wasn't. My opinion is that the people who wrote the dossier almost primarily wrote probably 90% of it was Glenn Simpson, his wife Mary Jacoby, based largely on articles and information that they acquired 10, 12 years earlier when they were writing those same types of stories at the Wall Street Journal. I think that they brought in Nellie Orr to do those 702 queries and get some up-to-date information from open source places in Russia, because she speaks Russian language. And I think they also used Mr. Baumgartner to some extent as well. He also speaks fluent Russian, and he and Nellie were in school together, and I think one of them may have been the instructor in that deal. I can't remember, but they were in school together. They're both Russian studies people. So I think the primary authors of the dossier were Glenn Simpson, his wife Mary Jacoby, with a certain amount of help from Nellie Orr and Baumgartner. I think that's who wrote the dossier. I don't think Christopher Steele wrote a single word of the dossier. I think his collectors and intermediaries that he refers to are pretty much Glenn Simpson, Mary Jacoby, and Mr. Baumgartner. I believe that Fusion GPS created the dossier, but they knew that they could not go past the dossier to the FBI, the State Department, or anyone else. Not directly. They had to find someone else. They needed a third party. And that's when they turned to Christopher Steele. They could use his background as an intelligence officer to give it credibility. And he also had people he knew at the FBI and the State Department that he would be able to funnel it through to them. So I think that they simply created the dossier right there at Fusion GPS. They passed it to Steele through various ways of doing that. I'm not exactly sure. Probably used multiple ways, but they essentially wrote the information there at Fusion GPS, passed it over to Christopher Steele, and they allowed him to pass the information through the FBI, the State Department, and media sources and things and such. And then on his end, Glenn Simpson would take what he had given to Steele, who had then turned it around, given it right back to Glenn Simpson. Then he would go out to media sources as well and try to get them to run the dossier, publish the dossier. Many of these people, I think, reporters that he tried to get him to do it, I think he probably offered them money. I think we're going to find that to be true. I think he probably even paid some reporters to run certain stories. I think that the idea that there was any Russians associated with the sourcing of the dossier is also bullshit. I don't think there, and when I mean Russians, I mean Russians who were a part of Putin's government, or current or former intelligence officials. This is who Steele says the sources were, mostly, except for the PP-Gate story. In the dossier, it says that they were hotel workers. But for the most part, he's using the sources former Russian military intelligence officer, former and current, intelligence officer, former, official in the Russian government, whatever. He's dropping these titles, but these individuals who we're talking about, as referring to as Russians, are not Russians who were involved in Putin's government, part of his intelligence community or government or anything else. They're internationalist people of Russian descent who, many of them, live in the United States or Europe. They're international type citizens. They're not Russians involved in Putin's government. They are people of Russian descent who have no affiliation or attachment to Putin's government whatsoever. That's what I believe. Other than, you could maybe say, Oleg Deripaska, who may have been to some degree some kind of a source for Glenn Simpson. I believe that there was information from a foreign government that was probably included and made up part of what we see in the dossier as intelligence, so-called intelligence, which is false. It's not true. It's made up. Came from Ukraine, not Russia. So if there were any government officials divulging information which found its way into the dossier, it came from Ukraine, not Russia. I think two of the biggest things we're going to find if we ever get to the truth and the bottom of this is that Steele was not the author of the dossier, and that the sourcing for the dossier was largely, if there were any foreign individuals involved in that, it will be corrupt Ukrainian officials, not Russians. But that the primary authors of the dossier, Simpson and his wife, Nellie Orr, Mr. Baumgartner, primarily people who wrote the dossier. So, I understand. I don't get a chance to watch Dan Bongino's whole show. It's like an hour long or whatever. I get bits and pieces and clips from here and there. I do like Dan Bongino, but I understand from someone in the comments section yesterday that Bongino is now saying that he doesn't believe Steele wrote the dossier. So that's good. Finally getting caught up on it. But still the narrative is the Steele dossier. I can't wait until I no longer hear that term again, Steele dossier, because it's not true. Steele did not write the dossier. He did not. No intelligence official wrote the dossier. I've seen intelligence reports. They don't look like the dossier. They don't read like or sound like the dossier. Christopher Steele, having been a professional intelligence officer for many years, would not write anything that looks like the dossier. And that's the other reason why it's hard to believe that the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, and everyone else was duped by the dossier. In fact, we know from Kathleen Kvelic that she simply had a short session with Christopher Steele, and as he's telling her, we can tell from her notes, as he's telling her what's in the dossier, she's writing it down in notes and literally debunking half of what he's saying as he's saying it. It didn't go over her head. She figured out immediately, just like me and anyone else who's ever seen an intelligence report, that it was a bunch of hokum, a bunch of BS. And Trey Gowdy's right. When we finally get to the bottom of this, they're going to find that they never made any effort whatsoever to verify the dossier because they knew it was bullshit from day one. And the reason why they did all this, which we've talked about many times before, is because they simply never thought it would ever come into question or would ever be investigated, because they never thought that Hillary was going to lose. They thought this was all going to be taken care of. They could just basically do anything they wanted. Never have. They did everything they did. If you look at it now in hindsight, all the things that they did it with the state of mind that no one will ever be taking a look at this. Otherwise, they never would have done this the way they did it. And that's what's ultimately going to hang them. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you guys. Bye.